Hi and welcome back. Today is the day that I'll be doing the final assembly on this Nuremberg Box project. However, in order to do that, I have to go back a little bit and repair a mistake that I made in the last video. Here you can see the trim piece for the lid. It has a miter on the outside surface of the lock, but it needs a square edge to butt up against this flat panel on the back, and I had forgotten about that and I just cut the miter right through. My original thought was to simply replace these two trim pieces because initially I couldn't think of any way of repairing it, but then I started to wonder, well, I should be able to repair this, so that's what I'm going to show you today. So here you're looking at one of the repaired trim pieces. What I had to do was cut away a small section of the curled edge that wraps around the lid of the box and replace it with another tiny little curled edge that is a little bit longer, so I had the square edge to work with to fit to the back trim piece. This piece was brazed in the fire, and one of the reasons I didn't want to do this initially is because I had really no idea how to keep track of this little tiny piece while it was in the fire. As it turns out, the solution was pretty simple and obvious, and I'm pretty embarrassed that I hadn't thought of it right off the bat. So step one is to cut away a short section of the curved part of the trim piece. This leaves me a smooth flat section that I'll be able to use to attach the new curved section, and it makes sure that all the repairs aren't going to be seen from the front of the box. In this drawing, the lower portion of the teal colored piece has the curved section that I need to repair the original trim piece. In order to connect the two pieces together, I've left an L-shaped arm that extends over to the original trim piece. This allows me to hold everything together very securely, and by having the clamp on the opposite side of the trim piece, there's absolutely no way that it'll be involved in any of the brazing being done. And of course the final step is just to cut away the holder and then file the part to shape, and you're all set. And here's a look at the actual setup before it goes in the fire. Unfortunately, this clip is another failed attempt at trying to get the actual moment where the copper wire turns iridescent and melts. You can see the flux being applied here, and this is just 20 mil team borax right out of a grocery store. Here I'm preheating the copper wire so I can get the borax to stick to it. In this application, I thought it would be easier to apply the copper rod the same way you would a filler rod, instead of trying to attach the copper to the piece. And here's the part that everyone wants to see, but I wasn't able to get it. The copper wire is actually melting right in the bright spot right in the center of the fire. In this clip, I'm making another attempt to get the exposure right. This piece has nothing to do with the lock. It's something else that I actually was intending to weld, but I decided to braze it because I was set up for the shot. So, and in this case, I did manage to get the exposure right. So you will actually see the copper wire melting. I'm using a poker here to make sure that the copper rod is tight up against the piece. And you can see how that small adjustment has made all the difference. The copper wire turns iridescent and then it just simply melts away. And now I need to do the same thing with that little loop that's sticking outside of the piece. It's amazing how that small bit of separation can really prevent it from melting. It needs to be in contact with the piece to get as hot as possible. And it does need to be coated with flux to get the melting temperature as low as possible. Not paying attention to these little details can really cause a lot of problems when you're trying to braze like small, awkwardly shaped pieces that can burn up really easily in the fire. Here you get a really good look at the copper wire melting. It's actually suspended. It doesn't really have anywhere to go because it can't wick anywhere. So you'll see that as soon as I touch it with the poker and get it to make contact, it'll just disappear because it now has somewhere to go. Here's a closer look at the repaired piece. This type of detail is really commonly found in old locks. Now that these two side pieces have been repaired, I'll be riveting them to the lid of the box the same way I did the front and the back trim pieces. And the last thing that needs to get done on this build is to assemble the actual box. On the first box, I used corner trim pieces to assemble all the sides. This time I'm going to be using dovetails. Dovetails in metalworking are shaped very similarly to dovetails in woodworking. This panel has the actual dovetails because you can see the shape of the dovetails on the profile. These are the pins, and you can see the dovetail shape is actually on the end of the pins, not the profile. The profile of the pins are straight because they have to slide into the dovetail panel. In a woodworking joint, the glue would be the only thing that would be keeping the end panel from sliding out of the dovetails. However, here I'm also going to be turning those straight pins into dovetails as well. To do this, I've filed a slight bevel to each of the dovetails. Now when I'm peening the ends of the tails over, they're going to be locking into that plate the same way the dovetails lock into the pins on the other side. This makes a very strong joint because the dovetails are locking the corner in from two directions. But the biggest difference between woodworking dovetails and metalworking dovetails is that the woodworking dovetail usually becomes a prominent feature of the piece. However, in metalworking, dovetails are quite often used because you want the actual joint to disappear. The front and the back plate of this box have a couple of additional holes near the bottom, and those holes are going to be used to mount two rails that are going to be used to attach the bottom to the box. The bottom panel is just going to be screwed to these rails, so if for whatever reason the key doesn't work, I have an easy way of accessing the lock. So this box has a few pieces that need to be held in place while I'm doing the riveting. So to make the process a little bit easier, I'm going to start by peening over the ends of the rails slightly, just so that they don't fall out of the holes and, drop out every time I move the box. Once those are held in place, I can go ahead and start assembling the rest of the box. The ends of the dovetails get hammered down the same way that I do any other rivet. I just start very slowly and systematically, and I start hammering each one until everything starts to lock in place. And then as I hammer some more, I position everything, make sure that everything's tight, and I just keep on going until I have a completed box. Now this process is a lot easier if you spend a lot of time making sure that these dovetails fit as accurately as you would with a woodworking dovetail. But you've probably noticed from some of the earlier clips that the dovetails really don't have to be that close, because you can push the metal around a fair amount, and you can seal up some pretty amazingly wide gaps. So they have to be as close as you can, but if you can't get them perfect, don't worry about it. It'll all be taken care of in the peening process. So this is how it looks when I'm done painting down all the ends of the dovetails, and yes, this mess will turn into a very nice looking box. The box is going to be standing on 4 corner blocks. These feet are just going to elevate it, from the table a little bit and give it a little more visual interest. These pieces are just assembled by riveting, pretty much the same way I do everything else. And these feet are going to be riveted to the bottom panel of the box. And for the bottom panel, you can see that I'm just using an old practice plate from the lid. And here's the finished box, finally in one piece. Overall, I'd have to say that I'm really happy with the results. As I mentioned earlier, I don't like the way that I approach this particular box, but I really like the process of building and designing this type of project. So this is it for this box. I'm not going to carry it any further, even though there are things that I can fine-tune. I will be taking everything that I've learned from this series and applying it to similar projects. So you are going to be seeing more of this, because I did find that this was something that I really enjoyed. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hi, I'm Dennis, and thanks for watching. If you have any questions, you can contact me by using the email address that I have shown here. If you like the channel and the work that I'm doing, please consider becoming a patron. Every dollar you contribute will bring me one step closer to being able to produce videos full-time.